And we are live. And I
Uh,
believe that our Facebook integration is working. Yay!
so at
Oh,
some point, we will not need to say this anymore because we will no longer be surprised.
Yeah.
Birthday!
Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the Story Engine Birthday Bash.
Oh my god! Well, you know what? I feel. Oh my god! I have a moment. I have to. We have to admit our guilt, and I hope Story Engine will not be too hurt. We didn't get Story Engine a birthday cake. We didn't get Story Engine a birthday hat.
I had the thought. I felt bad about it. Clearly, Deck of Worlds is the favorite child.
I was gonna say Deck of Worlds being the youngest. Lore Master's deck is currently still ultrasound, but about to be delivered. Pun intended.
Yeah, the Deck of Worlds is in for a real surprise.
Yeah,
About to go from the baby to the middle child.
yeah, but right now still the baby, and so like I think it's like Story Engine's like, well, of course Deck of Worlds got a cake and a hat. Of course, that's fine. I don't need it. I'm the eldest. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, or maybe Story Engine is like maybe our decks are, I don't know, they have like dog years, so Story Engine's actually like 50 something and birthdays just don't matter anymore.
Could be. It could be. We don't
It's
really
like
know what deck
I'm
time is like.
60 in deck years.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So maybe like when Story Engine's 10, it'll get like the most epic birthday because it's like a centurion at that point in deck years. Yeah, if you guys in the chat have a belief of what deck years means in the world of decks versus human years, I'd love to hear them. Hopefully it's not like cell phones where it's like 1 year and then you just don't exist anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think Story Engine is living proof that it hasn't done yet. Hasn't happened yet. So, but looks like people are at least offering celebratory emojis in the chat. Moose Floors threw some
Hey,
confetti. We have some cakes from Wyvern. So Story Engine is very grateful because their Story Engine's parents is apparently really bad.
yeah,
We're bad
yeah,
parents. To be fair, maybe they should always understand that when you're nearing the hypothetical birth of another baby, you have to like there's just a lot of other things going on right now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Parents are leading busy lives.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So, but in order to make sure we do not deviate off and talk too much about Lore Master's deck, because that would just that would then
yeah.
really be the cherry on the cake
So
for
for the
for
eldest birthday, yeah.
yeah. Maybe we should quickly introduce ourselves to anyone who is new. We're the Story Engine deck. I think that goes without saying. Um, I'm Moroki. I'm the CEO of the company. My pride and joy for the Story Engine is making sure all the little cogs in the engine run as squeaky smooth as possible. Um, this is
I am Eric. I am the community manager. I look at customer service inboxes and social media accounts, and I write a lot of emails primarily. I'm also one of the writers on Lore Master's deck.
And I am Peter Chakowski, and I designed the original Story Engine deck, and I'm kind of our like head deck architect guy. So yeah, today's really exciting for me because like Story Engine is one of those things that I divide my life into the before and after of like when Story Engine happened. Like it is like a landmark point in my life for figuring out like where in time something happened. Story Engine is definitely like a what's the KT boundary, which is that line of dust from the big asteroid impact. The KT boundary of my life is the Story Engine. Like it was such a big change for me, and so it's really exciting to get to celebrate that today. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about some of the before the deck days, and then how the deck happened, and what has happened since.
BSE
It's
and
exciting.
ASE.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Before Story Engine, after Story Engine. And maybe shout out in the chat if you guys were of the Story Engine era, or if you were or if you were an ASE or an after Story Engine era when you joined the community. Because I know we have folks who probably have been with us from the very beginning. Which is Story Engine. Some people joined us with Deck of Worlds, our soon-to-be middle child, and then some joined our community from Lore Master's deck, which is our most recent deck. And in some ways, it's interesting because I say us, and I guess in some weird way, I ended up in a weird part of story, like a part of Story Engine from the beginning, but in a very different way than I am with Story Engine deck, like Story Engine now. It's like I wasn't. I was like I don't know, like an ethereal like fairy godparent that kind of like came in and was like, "Hello there."
You're the logistics fairy.
Yeah,
You're
the
the
logistics
fairy
theory.
logistics mother.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense because you have like threatened to take my teeth before when I've been behind on my share of logistics. Jokes.
It's almost like some Halloween precursor stuff.
Yeah.
Halloween precursor stuff here. So, we're going to be taking a whole bunch of questions from people today. If anyone has any questions they want to ask about our journey, Story Engine, anything about Story Engine, even if it's like tutorial based, maybe there's something that's always confused you about the decks that you might want us to clarify. We have some amazing tutorials all over our YouTube page. Obviously, if you guys ever like need inspiration or need how to do a how-tos, our YouTube's really great. All of our social media, we tend to try and run little like thoughts and tutorials. Our live streams, we often do some tutorials on the live streams, and obviously we do a lot of story prompts, which we're going to do today, including breaking out the like as I loved how it was described in the newsletter, the embarrassing baby photos of the Story Engine, which is
I've been calling it the blueberry deck.
The blueberry deck, which sounds pretty adorable, actually. It also just shows how much of like tree huggers Peter and we are. I mean, we do tend to do a lot of tree planting initiatives with the Story Engine, and this probably clearly is one of them because if you guys can't tell, that's like that's like a bag of formerly frozen blueberries, which you've also proven is very reusable and very durable of a bag.
It survived like 7 moves.
Yeah, that's kind of I actually know.
It's like, just imagine how good those blueberries would still be if there were blueberries in that bag.
Really, like actually at this point I think it'd be like blueberry wine. It would have fermented.
Yeah. Or they would have been jazzed up because all like the Story Engine different storytellings would have like run up. It would have been like, this blueberry wants to protect someone they loved, but they must give up their most delicious flavor.
Next April Fool's deck idea, releasing a blueberry deck. Just let's put that in our social media calendar for later. But yeah, this is before there was the Story Engine deck, there was this awful prototype that I made with index cards, and when I ran out of index cards, I started writing on envelopes. Like I just had some leftover envelopes, and that was. I don't think this is the first draft of the deck. I think there was an even worse one that I don't have anymore. But this was like early. You'll see all kinds of messed up stuff with it, but early stuff with the deck that we'll actually be making a prompt with today. You're going to build a prompt using and I want to say it's like a real like raggedy ass version of the deck, pardon my French, but it actually, I tried it out this morning and I'm like, this draft worked better than I think I've been giving it credit for. It's like operational. There's a couple weird things about it, but it's operational.
It's always amazing how we have these particular perceptions of previous iterations of our work where we end up we think it's really horrible, and then we go back, and I think that's usually the sign where things are really good, because like I will say, and I don't know whether it's like sometimes maturity too, we become a little bit kinder to ourselves, but I know when I was young, when I looked at old artwork or old stories I wrote, I would die. Like it hurt me to see how much how bad my art was or how bad some of my writing was. I was like, this is just like, the world is never allowed to see this, right? But then I know at some points in my adulthood, I've gone back to some of my old sketches or some of the old writings I have, and I've been like, you know what? This isn't bad. Like, I would be nervous. Like, I'd be like opening the file. I'm like, and then I'd read it and be like, you know what? You don't completely suck. Like, I was like, there's potential here. Or even worse, there's sometimes in my adulthood where I go back to my university essays and I'm like, I sound like a better writer back then than I do now. I was like, damn, I sounded so smart.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I've had that problem before too. I mean, it's neither option is great. There's the option where like you think your writing was great and then it turns out that it was awful, and then there's the you thought that it was awful and you've improved and it turns out that like nothing about you has changed. But you know what? It's the nice thing is that it's a surprise, and I think the big difference is that we change as people and our expectations of ourselves and what we value changes, and that's like okay. You know,
Yes.
there are stories that like at the time probably were good stories, but for me they represent like a different set of values that I lived by at that time, where I might not identify with the same message anymore. So I like that we change as people. And one thing that I actually was really appreciating as I was looking through the Story Engine anthology, which is one of the prizes that we're giving away today, was like realizing that it really is kind of like a weird fiction translated diary of my life as I was working on the Story Engine deck. There are so many stories that you can point to, like this card came out of me having written that story, or that like this moment in shaping my life and my mindset at the moment that I made the deck is like captured in this sort of this like diary entry of a microfiction piece.
Mhm.
But yeah, one more time, what we're doing for the giveaway today, I think we've mentioned that we are going to be giving away a free playmat and a free book.
This might be the
And you can
wrong book.
enter to
That's the
win
wrong book.
by yeah, so you'll follow us on socials, tag us in a post about how to use the Story Engine, and you'll be entered to win a playmat and a book. And this book is the Story Engine Anthology. It is all of these short stories that I was writing as I was developing the deck. And I'll be reading a couple of those stories today because they actually fit into the story of how the Story Engine came together. We have the beautiful 18 by 12 inch playmat. It's a nice soft playing surface to be able to pick up and put down cards. We'll actually be using this exact playmat for our own prompts today. Yeah, you can win that by telling us how you use the Story Engine deck. And yeah, the other thing that I realized about the anthology, and I always forget to mention this, is like we have an absolute banger guest list in that anthology. There are 3 voice guests who read some of the stories. One of the stories that I'll be reading today is actually narrated by Cecil Baldwin, the voice of Welcome to Night Vale. In the book is a little URL where you can go and have him read you the story. There are 6 stories narrated by Jonathan Sims, voice of the Magnus Archives, and then Lydia Nicholas, who's also in the Magnus Archives, as well as the Rescue Code Gaming podcast. So incredible voice guests reading the stories. And then we had, I can't remember the number of guest stories that were written by a number of collaborators who've been involved with the deck, including like Jordan Shively, including I believe Robert Shearman's in that one. Robert Shearman's one of the writers for Doctor Who. So really, really cool guest list in there. And I'm excited that we'll get to share some of that with you today.
Yeah. So once again, in order to enter the giveaway, and we're going to do the draw sometime near the end of the live stream. Just make a post on your favorite social media platform, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Make sure you tag the Story Engine so that we'll get your entry, and just tell us how you use the deck and how's the deck helpful for you. Yeah. So you were talking a little bit about your story and how and sort of how like obviously stories from the anthology ties into your real life. So like maybe let's go back to the very, very origins. That it was circa 2019, 5 years ago. The world was a very different place.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. Sort of like what kind of brought you to the creation of the Story Engine? Because in some ways there was a whole kind of different thing that you were doing too. We all knew you as a writer. We knew you as a creator. You did a lot of, you did web comics. You were a writer. I know you did music as well. You might still do music. I haven't heard you sing any tunes recently, but I know you had songs released. Where did Story Engine fit into all of that, or what spurned on that idea?
It came from having to write a lot of stories for the shortest story. So the shortest story was my microfiction project. I was writing like a weekly micro story every week, and I was thinking a lot about like what is the how small can you shrink a story and it's still recognizably a story. And I also like needed a tool to help me think of all of these stories, and it came especially at a time where like 2019 was a terrible year for me, like probably the worst year of my life, just objectively. And I was having a really hard time, like worst mental health year for me, all time low. I had like my dog had died earlier that year of cancer, which was like really heartbreaking for me. I'm like love my pets. A good thing is I had just moved to London, England, but a bad thing was I didn't know that many people there, and it was like this new, overwhelming, very expensive city where like I didn't know anyone. The biggest thing looming over it all was that I had like, and I truly cannot get into details about this, but I'd signed a very bad contract with a very bad publisher, and things were getting legal. There was at that time in my life, like it looked like I thought I was going to lose the rights to everything I had written so far, and I might lose the rights to any creative work I produced for the rest of my life. Like it was bad. It was just like a very bad year. And I know for me, like writing was sometimes an escape from that, where like I could channel some of those things into stories. But writing was also sometimes like this thing where I would want to write, but I would just feel like, so what is the point? Like I didn't feel like I had a future in writing. It is like the year that I almost quit writing. Like I really thought I'm not gonna be able to publish anything under my name again. Like, what is the point in trying? And it was very shitty and dark. Is like the quick summary. So a few things were happening at the same time. One thing was like I was trying to find a way to fall back in love with writing and to like let go of kind of this feeling that any writing I did was like part of the dead future for me. So one thing that I was actually kind of lucky to do was it was a year where I was kind of like forced to think about writing not as like an end product in my career, but like if I was writing, I was kind of just writing to write, and maybe these stories will never get published, or maybe they'll never go anywhere because maybe this is it for my career anyway. And weirdly, that is like it can be very motivating to like let go of the end point in the process and just focus on the process. Like, what is it about telling stories that is worth doing, even if no one ever reads them? What is it that is worthwhile about sitting in the creative process and just being creative, even if none of it amounts to anything? And like that is a philosophy that I still very much try to live by. Like all the time I get distracted thinking about like what am I writing and what is the end product of it. But as often as I can, I try to go back to like being in the process and playing with it. Um, but through kind of this like really like I don't know, just it was a very difficult period. One of the things that happened was I really sort of reassessed my relationship with storytelling. Like I realized that stories are just a fundamental way that I think I process the world, and I think that actually a lot of people process the world and the things that happen to us. Like we go out in life and sometimes you have a very bad year, sometimes a series of very bad things happen to you, and like those experiences are things that you metabolize and you make stories out of. Like I had a moment, like almost an out of body moment in mid 2019 where I realized like at some point all these bad things that are happening will have already happened and they'll be over, and they will be a story that you're telling someone, and you will have a chance to decide what that story means. um, and as like disembodying as that was, it also gave me a lot of motivation to realize that like yeah, stories, you know, everything that happens is a story. All of it goes into our art, and all of it is something that eventually will be over, and you'll be on like the good side of it. And if you kind of like think about your life as a story that way, it makes it easier for me anyway to get through the parts that are like really difficult. And that's actually where and I think I will actually grab the Story Engine anthology for a second. There's a story in the Story Engine anthology that like captures this idea. It's called Story Engines, and it's literally kind of a story about from the perspective of an alien observing humans and trying to figure out what is it about them and the way that they process the world. This is one of those stories that I won't be able to do justice to because Cecil Baldwin is the one who narrates it in the anthology. But I think it's like I don't know. It's one of the lessons I took out of the year and out of the process of creating the Story Engine as a deck here. I'm just going to hide our logo for a second. We came to see how, while our world dimmed with age, yours blazed in bright defiance, not like a flame calling to a moth, but like a moth on fire, burning and never burning out. What are you, humans, that you burn so? There's a creature in your oceans that cannot stop moving or it will stop breathing, and it cannot stop breathing or it will stop moving. Shark, you call it. It's magic how it breathes in one set of molecules through its gills and gives back another, the world forever transmuted by its passing. It is the same with humans, too. You breathe in the world by moving through it, by surviving it. You take in one kind of matter, trials and victories and burials and trysts and hardships, and transform them into stories. And then, by some aching alchemy of the soul, the world becomes the tales you tell about it, about why there is hope, about how you have survived as long as you have. And if you stop breathing, you will stop telling stories. And if you stop telling stories, you will stop breathing. And this is the fire you carry inside you, the fuel that burns and never burns out. You are story engines, and you will carry on making stories until the tale of you is over, and you become fuel for another furnace of memories burning through the darkness. We came to your world, and we saw this, and we understood you cannot save us. You cannot teach us to burn. But there is one thing you can do. You can take in the memory of us having been here, having survived as long as we have, and you can make a story from it. And in that way, maybe you can save us, or at the very least, keep us burning and burning and never burning out. So yeah, that was kind of like my cap. Oh, thank you. That was like my capsule way of like understanding what was going on that year. The other thing that really helped was like I was working on the story engine deck. I was trying to find something that would help me stay more motivated to write, and that would bring some of the joy back into the process of writing, because it was sometimes like a grind. Like I was just so sad all the dang time, that didn't always feel like it was worth writing. But having these cards where I could like play around with stories, like bring this element of game back into it. It like actually made me want to write again. It motivated me in a way that I hadn't felt in a while. So the story engine became this like real like pleasure project for me. It became very much like a hope project for me of like I think there's something in this, and it is like definitely part of what got me through 2019 and got me past the point of like thinking I was going to quit writing, and instead like kind of focusing on this thing that completely changed my life after it came out. Like the pre and post launch was so different, and I'm glad that like before the launch I kind of found my own peace with what was going to happen in life. I'm glad I had that opportunity before like the circumstances of life changed. I didn't want it just to be like my life got better and then I wasn't sad. I like found my own reasons to like to re-engage with life beforehand. There's another story from the anthology that I'll read at some point that gets into that as well. But yeah, that's kind of how the story engine fit into my career. It was like a very bleak year, and this like very exciting idea gave me motivation. And eventually, I kind of figured like, oh, if I share this with other people, maybe they'll get some motivation or inspiration from it too. And it like took off in so much bigger of a way than I expected.
I find it kind of admirable that you were able to use writing as a way to kind of find joy back in writing, because I left another industry as well, of like for not quite the same reasons you had to take a break from writing, or at least you questioned whether you should leave writing. But I left the acting industry in 2016 because like I burned out of the industry, right? Like it's such a tough industry to be in. It's as cutthroat as people describe it as. It's competitive. It can really take a huge toll on your self-esteem, because they do judge you that much on your physical appearance and everything, and all the kind of hoopla that people say, like it's your talent that's going to get you on stage. Like I'll be super real with people. Talent matters, but if you don't look a certain way, you just don't make it. Period. It's incredibly judgmental. Like our industry, like if you think of the way we consume media and the way we expect people to look on screen, that expectation carries through when it comes to casting. And it was a tough industry. It's extremely financially volatile, and I burned out. And I can tell you that I didn't really act for fun after that. So, and like I've gone back and done some work now and again, but I don't know if I ever will pursue it. I've had people ask me, like I've been on stage in the last 2 years, and people have asked whether I would ever go back to the industry. And the thing I said to them is like, if this industry doesn't change, probably not. It's not realistic. And my priorities changed in life, right? And like when we were talking about how we change as human beings, like my priorities changed, and what I was looking out of life changed. So in like, it's I think it's really great that like you not only refound your joy in writing and used it to kind of really support you past the really, really difficult time. It also, like as you said, it became what it is. It became what it is now. In fact, I know we want to probably go and talk a little bit more about the journey, because I know even just like the whole Kickstarter journey was so, I think, not what you expected it to be.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to pull, so I know you pulled out the Blueberry deck so that you can embarrass Story Engine a little bit with its baby photos, but I also pulled out something that you may or may not feel sheepish about as well. But
I think I know what this is.
He like immediately backs away from the camera. So like I said before, in 2020, I joined Story Engine as a short-term consultant to kind of work through some of the early logistics and joy. Like at that point, Story Engine, like we weren't a store, we weren't like, I don't think there was any like thoughts at the time. It's like, this is going to be more than, you know, a few months long project and then it will finish at the end of it. Like that, you know, there was no store, there was no website, there was no newsletter. I don't know if there was any, so there was probably barely a social media. I don't know if at the time there was a story engine page or if it was just Peter being like,
I think it
Peter.
was just me. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
just me and the shortest story accounts.
Yeah. So when I consulted for Peter, I think it was interesting because I think you weren't really sure what you were going to get from me either. Because I was like, because at the time I was a freelance consultant, and I'm like, I do strategic management. And it's like, that could mean everything and nothing at the same time. And I did, you know, go through all kind of like the very tangibly things. But I know one of the things I challenged you to do was create a 3-year plan for me of what Peter wanted to be in 3 years. And it's interesting because I'm going to read some of these things out to everyone so you can sort of see like what we thought we were going to be at and where we ended up being. So where is it?
And so this was mid 2020, correct?
This was mid 2020. So obviously It's been 4 years since then, not 3. But I remember I think I said like in 1 year's time, how old will you be? And I think you wrote things like it's like I will have a steady paycheck. I'll be renting an apartment. I will have 2 dogs. I will be working on Story Engine full time or almost full time with a little bit of like side projects. And then in 2 years' time, I will be having like a secure paycheck. I will be working full time, maybe have a full time employee, and I'll be writing books and having projects on the side. And then in 3 years' time, so this would have been last year, folks. In 3 years' time, you wrote, I'll be drawing a secure and steady paycheck. I will have a home in, you wrote Toronto or Vancouver or Halifax. And you wrote, I'll be working on full-time and I'll have 2 full-time employees. So incredible, because I would say that basically more or less all came true.
Yeah, one dog. So not the 2 dogs, but yes, we got the dog.
Okay, there's a basil plant.
Yeah, basil plant is pet number 2.
Yeah.
I recently bought a very old fixer-upper house in Halifax, and 2 full-time employees, and yeah, it's weird to think that I remember being very hesitant to commit to goals back then. Like it just felt like if I say it, then I will jinx it. But look what happened. Look how it happened.
I remember when I challenged you to like do those visualization exercises. If we were making jokes about teeth, I definitely felt like pulling teeth. You were like, well, like, what if it doesn't happen? I'm like, it's okay if it doesn't, Peter. I promise. Like, it's not the world.
If it doesn't happen, I'll just read it on air in front of people, and we'll record it for posterity, and then we'll find out that you missed your goals.
It's like, oh, you thought you would have a business? It's like,
yeah. How funny would it be if you read out my goals from 3 years ago and none of them happened?
As long as what we were now was great in another way.
Yeah.
It's actually something I do for myself really regularly, and I keep documentation of a lot of my 5 years, and it's really fascinating reading them years later and being like, well, that didn't go there, not even a little bit. But you know what? My current life actually isn't so bad. Also, visualization is a very healthy tool. I would say this to anyone who's on this chat who has like goals to write your next bestseller, or you're creating your own game or whatever. Like, put pen to paper. You know what? I think as writers, we read so much like inspirational content that's like, I don't know, it's like, if you start writing today, like you've created a story, right? It's like, it's not a real story until you put pen to paper, like, kind of encouraging us to kind of get something started. It's the same thing when it comes to your goals of being published or being a touring writer. Like, put pen to paper and say, like, I would love to be having a published book and doing a book tour, right? And I have goals of signing something with Simon and Schuster in a few years. I had a client I used to work with, and I think she said like her goal from the get-go was to eventually be published by a larger publisher like Simon and Schuster. And it took her 12, like 11, I can't remember, it was like 9 or 10 self-published books or published with like a really small indie publisher. But she did it, right? Because the thing is, when you do those things, you set yourself into motion for the things you want to do. So that's Maroki's random free life advice today. Okay. I also want to say, I don't know if we mentioned this at the start, but for the celebration of Story Engine's 5th birthday, we also have
right. Yeah. We should do the thing where we the business and all that. Yeah. Hold on. There we go. We made a thing for it.
We made a thing for it. Birthday sale. So you can get 10% off our story engine deck. That's our main deck. Expansions, boosters, and accessories at storyenginedeck.com. So that is our core deck, up to 6 expansions, 12 boosters, and our Story Engine playmat or our Story Engine folding boxes. I believe that covers everything. And I believe that if you add those items, it should check out.
So you won't see it if you just go to the site. It looks at the regular price, but when you go to checkout, it should take 10% off. If it doesn't, email us and I will look into it.
Yeah, it's like email us. And
by email us, I mean email basically me. And if it sounds too complicated, I will forward the tech request to Peter, probably.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like seeing in the comments here that that Craig heard of the Story Engine deck and jumped in because it was shown at a writing workshop, and it was Brandon Crilly who used it in the class. So that's pretty cool. Brandon is one of our contributors to Deck of Worlds. So
Lore Masters deck, I think.
Lore Masters deck. Yeah. That's the word. I was trying to say the right word. My brain said it, and then it exited my mouth out of a different way. I'm tired.
And he did around when Deck of Worlds was coming out, he also did a guest story for The Shortest Story, which is my microfiction project, and then did a guest blog for the Story Engine about the process of writing that story from a prompt, actually. So you can see a behind the scenes creative process, like going from prompt to finished piece. If you search Brandon Crilly just in the search box on storyenginedeck.com.
We were actually all at Gen Con together this year, but unfortunately we didn't get a chance to meet up, which made me sad. I like regaling him with wine tales because I remember he liked learning about wine.
Yeah. I think he's a very engaged and interested person. Loves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So going back to the Story Engine's origin story, you created this deck. How did it even get to where it is now? So you read the deck, you wrote it. It obviously found iterations in Blueberry Deck. Blueberry Deck clearly is not what we have today for the Story Engine. The Story Engine now is a lovely deck of 180 cards plus expansions and boosters galore. How did we get here?
Yeah, so when the project launched, a lot changed. I had gone into launching the project thinking that because again, at the time I was much more focused on my own writing. So I thought I was launching my new anthology of stories. The Story Engine anthology was coming out. And alongside it, there was this it wasn't an add-on. It was kind of but it was sharing the podium with the anthology, which was this deck that I'd been working on that had motivated me and helped me come up with story ideas and helped me structure my stories better too. So they were kind of launching side by side and sharing the headline. And I thought it would mostly be fans of my existing writing who came to the project. And it was very clear very quickly within a few days that was not the case, that the deck had this own kind of magic to it that people were interested in, and that there was a need for other people who either wanted a little bit of an element of play or randomness in their story creation process. I don't think I thought about how many dungeon masters would be super into it as well. I played D&D a lot and I was writing for the tabletop RPG Emberwind at the time, but I hadn't really thought about it as as much as this active storytelling tool for dungeon masters. And there was just this community that formed really, really quickly of people who knew exactly what they wanted to use it for their own creative projects. So a few things happened in those initial days after the project launched. One was I realized the book of stories is not the point anymore. It is a load-bearing wall of how I got to have this deck. It is part of the story of how the deck came to be, but the deck is going to be its own thing. So I remember altering the project to really focus on let's talk about the deck. This is what people are interested in, and that's what they were asking for. They wanted more pledges that were focused on the deck. The other thing that didn't surprise me, but I'd been very hesitant to commit to doing expansions and boosters. I was very afraid to fail by success and stretch myself too thin on this thing, but people really, really wanted expansions and boosters at the gate. Like people were clamoring for the fantasy expansion. There were some suggestions for like genres like post-apocalyptic, where I'm like, that's not a full expansion, but it should have something dedicated if we're gonna do that. And it took some strong arming from the like feedback from the community in like the comments and project updates. But eventually I decided, okay, I will do 3 expansions. I will test my idea for how the expansions will work. I will make sure that it's solid, and then I will announce that yes, we can do expansions as stretch goals if we get enough people. I did the same thing for boosters, and we ended up, the project just kept growing. It just kept growing. We eventually ended up unlocking all 6 of the boosters that I'd pitched and all 3 of the expansions, and there's a lot of excitement for that.
I mean,
So
it grew so much that it continued to grow into Deck of Worlds.
yeah,
We
it's true.
need more expansions.
You know,
And-
the original 3 expansions and 6 boosters weren't enough.
And the idea for Deck of Worlds came from a comment that was left on the Story Engine project. The initial seed for that came from someone being like, I wonder if you could do a world building deck. And I was like, I think you could. And once Story Engine was in fulfillment on freight, I had like really thrown myself into the Deck of Worlds development. But the other couple things that changed, these are like very minor details, but they're just interesting to me, where originally there were no card type icons. Every card had the half gear icon on it. And it just took up so much real estate, and it blocked a lot of the picture, and it made the design function hard. And it made it harder to sort cards out, especially for colorblind users, where like the icon is something they can see if they can't tell what color it is. So that changed to increase accessibility, and also increase just visibility of things. And the other
We should have
thing
tried
that
to have found some prototype images to share with people. I think
I-
there was some like existing sometimes on the very, very old Kickstarter page, or
The-
very occasionally sometimes when I'm clicking through our assets, I'll be like, oh, that looks different. That looks vintage.
that looks, yeah, vintage is the word for it. The
Because I
other
think
two,
it was almost like a cube before the original package, right?
So the original package was a cube box. It was going to be like just packed tight cards. And originally it was actually talking to our producer on that deck, the actual factory, who had some suggestions for like, if you have these open trays, A, it's easier to draw, and B, you can like create a prompt by just flipping over the top cards without actually the cards having to leave the deck. And I really liked that idea, and I was also in love with the experience of opening the box like a treasure box. Like, again, part of what I think the deck does is it makes it exciting and fun to write, and I think part of that is this like experience of adventure and discovery and feeling like you're opening something. So that all fit with my vision for the deck really nicely. And then the last thing was, I think the conflicts deck used to be called obstacles. And I think if you watch the original video, and in fact, if you even watch like the oldest like explanation of what the story engine is on our YouTube, even, I think I still call it obstacles in that, because that was recorded in my London flat. And it was still early enough that that's what I thought it was going to be before I rewired things. So yeah, a few things changed. Some of that through feedback from the comments, and some of that through me just realizing what was going to work or what wasn't going to work.
Yeah. What was your rationale for, like, do you find that the conflicts deck is different and you just renamed it conflicts from obstacles, or was there actually a change in its functionality?
There was a bit of a change in its functionality, because calling it conflicts, it did 2 things. One is I think it helped articulate the deck in terms of like existing story theory, like how we think about storytelling and what constitutes a story. So it plugged into that a little bit better, and then it expanded the role of the deck a little bit, because obstacles all felt like things the person had to overcome, and the conflicts deck now is kind of like, yeah, things to overcome. Sometimes it's a price that has to be paid, or sometimes it is a fallout for the person getting what they want. So it's the conflict that comes not before but after. So it's not an obstacle, but it's like an aftershock. And I think conflicts gets at that idea better, a lot better than obstacle does.
I think so too. It's like it's one of the things I think is most interesting about the deck, and when you demo where you actually kind of get an aha moment, because it's very easy to come up with an obstacle, like literally a wall is an obstacle if you have to go from point A to point B. It can be something that's not really tied into like your character development anyway, but like a conflict or a consequence. It's no longer about the thing that's in front of them, but it's about how it affects them as a person.
Yeah,
And that's what I really like about that particular stack of cards.
Yeah, and they've like grown into probably my favorite card type in the story engine. It's a hard one to choose because they all are like very crucial to the functioning of the deck. But I think conflict to me is often the juiciest one. It's the one where
I
start to
do
go like,
personally
"Ooh."
have a bias towards conflict as well. I think like that's usually the time where you feel like what you've created, it almost will immediately challenge all the preconceived notions you might have had for your storyline right up to that point. And I like things that kind of makes me think or changes the entire perspective of something.
Yeah, and I think the engine and conflict cards together are probably what, because I've gotten emails from writers who've found that they can structure better stories because of the deck, and I think it comes from that pairing of engine conflict. I think that like if you have a motivation for your character and then something they have to overcome, like your baseline success with that story to like hook people, to have them feel something for the character and identify with their struggle, like that baseline goes up so much higher. I know my most effective stories have something like that, something that the character wants, an obstacle to getting it. Yeah, so I think that like it's those card types that are responsible for the deck almost as like a tutorial system for helping writers like punch up their writing or improve their writing. If you really focus on making people understand the engine, the motivation the character has, and then helping them really feel the effects of the conflict, like that the story is going to work. At a minimum, it's going to work.
Yeah. So taking it to the finish line, and I'm really hoping that in discussing this, we're not going to accidentally jinx what's happening with Lore Master's deck, because Lore Master's deck is like currently right exactly in the situation that's described for Story Engine, which was fulfillment. Because I think like it was probably it was at that point the largest crowdfunded campaign that you'd run at that point. I remember you had listed a pretty modest goal for Story Engine, and it completely blew right out of the water in ways you had never even imagined it would be, and that completely changed the trajectory of what it's going to be like. Sometimes when you have a project that is really successful, it sounds really exciting, but people there was something that was like taught to me in a mastermind recently, that's the idea that's like, are you excited for a lot of success? Are you also scared? Because the thing we don't realize is that when you have something that grows really, really big, it means the problems you get also get bigger, right? So there's some famous stories, I think, from Story Engine that we've probably talked about many, many a time, but we have some new people on the live stream today, so I'm sure they'll be very tickled by some of the stories that came out of Story Engine fulfillment.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like 2019, worst year of my life by far. 2020, a very bad year for the world. And for me personally, it was a year that like went fairly well. So when I'm going to list all the things that I wouldn't say went wrong with fulfillment. It's that went wrong in the world at the time of fulfillment that we just had to keep working through and figuring out solutions to. When you list them, it makes it sound like this will have been the worst year of my life, but was not. 2020 relatively smooth despite all this. So we're fulfilling in like mid to late 2020. So there was COVID. So literally we fulfilled through a plague. The ship, the container vessel that was carrying the Story Engine anthology almost sank. It got delayed for weeks, having to put in for repairs at the port of Tacoma after like a huge storm. There was a port that, so our UK freight that was supposed to drop off, the ports were so busy and backed up because there was a freight crisis that was beginning to happen here, that Felixstowe, which is the closest port to Spiral Galaxy Games, who fulfills our things in the UK and Europe, their port, it was so busy that the ship just decided, nope, we're not going to drop off any of these goods that we were supposed to. We're just going to keep going. So a ship with all of our stuff just bypassed the UK entirely and ended up going to Zeebrugge in Belgium. I think that's how you say it, Zeebrugge. And then later we had to basically figure out a way to land freight it back from Zeebrugge across back to the UK, while Brexit was officially finally happening for real. And also, at the same time, not only was Brexit happening for real, but there were snap closing borders like pretty much daily because of COVID coming back at the end of as winter came in, and people were starting to get a little bit less. People were starting to gather a little bit more. Cold season, just things spread more. So yeah, the world map was changing with Brexit and the UK leaving the EU. Borders were closing, plagues were happening, ships were sinking, ports were closing. It was utter chaos. I remember especially in the UK with Spiral Galaxy, like huge shout out to Spiral Galaxy for what they did for us, because they had contingency plans like hour by hour for if our truck bringing our stuff gets across the UK border before midnight on this day when Brexit happens or not. And then also for the stuff going back out, because they had to go back out to Europe after they fulfilled it. They had plans for if parcels are under 2 kilograms and can be sent using this specific postal service with the UK, which Royal Mail has said will continue functioning until this date. We'll send those parcels. Maybe we'll break some parcels into 2 separate shipments to get it under that weight limit. Like they had hour by hour contingency plans for how to work around which borders and which mail systems closed at which times. It was absolutely
I actually didn't know the story.
Yeah,
Either that or I forgot. I think we were too excited. Not exciting, but the idea of a ship capsizing was always kind of like the story to tell. But the logistics person in me is very impressed by what Spiral did, and also did not realize that the freight for the UK had just kind of like, woohoo!
Off to Belgium. We'd all love to just go to Belgium when we have problems, wouldn't we? Yeah. So, but we got through all of it and fulfilled a little later than I think I'd originally anticipated, but not by much. I think I'd said fall 2020, and a bunch of things were able to fulfill in fall 2020, but a lot of the collector packages that were waiting on the book had to fill later in that year, and I think some leaked over to January. But we got very close. Like I think we had 70% or something done, and people were very understanding. I remember like I was posting updates basically weekly to let people know exactly what was happening in each of the regions. Yeah.
I definitely can. Where was my brain trying to go with this? Oh, I definitely remember the freight crisis of 2020. I know in the wine world, like everyone was saying there was going to be a champagne shortage. And that's because they straight up weren't able to get champagne or wine onto boats to freight it over to North America. And obviously champagne only comes from Champagne, France. You can't get it from anywhere else. So, and not just champagne, but like Spain, like there were literally crates of wine exploding in the sun because they were just being left at the dock and the boats couldn't pick them up because either they were too congested or whatever, and the product would just go to waste. And I know that was the situation. It's the reason why like a lot of cost of goods went up. It's not just like Story Engine, like the whole world was affected by this, right? Like it's the reason why anyone who probably went and had a home reno done between 2020 and 2023, the famous COVID renovations, they were suddenly like wondering why their shelves and cabinets were costing so expensive, is because they literally couldn't get wood or paper or anything. So, and I know that it carried all the way over into Deck of Worlds fulfillment as well. These things are planned months in advance, and they just like, and they, people like when you have things that take months and months and months to like figure out the lead time, those costs trickle down all the way. So yes, Bronwyn, I'm glad none of the Story Engine shipments have, knock on wood, to this day, exploded. At least I don't think any of our things have exploded yet.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I've heard.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like the worst that has usually happened to any of our decks is like a forklift drives into a pallet and destroys them. That did unfortunately happen to us at Gen Con. We received a lot of our freight, a bunch of our freight for Gen Con, and there was nothing like pulling a box off. And then just watch and just like literally could see like where the forklift had just brutally impaled the deck. But that also showed how strong some of our decks were, because it didn't. I think only one deck got destroyed. It didn't even make it all the way
got through one layer, not even a full layer.
And stop a forklift. That could be our new advertisement. Story Engine can also be great for stopping forklifts.
I know I dropped Deck of Worlds in the ocean in January in New Brunswick one time. And it actually turned out okay.
It's a great photo shoot.
It's a great photo shoot, and this is the deck, and it's fine. It's
and fine. Water resistant. That could be all our new all our new defining factors. Like water resistant, can survive brief polar Arctic plunges. Can occasionally handle some sort of beating.
Water resistant to like 1 meter, just like your cell phone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty great little origin story to share. And obviously, if anyone has questions that they want to ask about the deck or about Story Engine or about us in general, we're more than happy to answer. But perhaps in the meantime, and obviously, like we're doing a giveaway today for anyone who's joined us a little bit late. We're doing an awesome giveaway where we're giving away the Story Engine anthology. Peter read a short story from it earlier, and we'll likely do one again, and maybe we could do if you have another one, we could also do one before we run and do some blueberry deck building. But we're gonna give away the anthology and also a lovely playmat. I realized I was like talking behind the playmat and I could hear my voice reverberating back to myself of the story engine. And in order for you to do it, all you have to do is create a post on your favorite social media platform, whether it's Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, tag the story engine and just sort of share how you use the deck or how it's helped you.
If you don't tag us, we won't see it.
Yeah, if you don't tag us, we won't see it. I'm sorry. It's not. That's why you tag, because then we get the little notifying ping. And we're dropping all the names in a big shiny hat right now. And we will do a draw at the end of the live stream. So, yes.
There's no names in the hat yet. The names are on paper right now.
That'd be funny if you put the like hat on it and just
it just spills all everywhere. In the couch cushions, yeah.
Yeah. You can tell we have a theatrical background when we have a big sequined hat in the house.
Yeah.
Yes. So
then, but before we crack out the blueberry deck, I think I will read one more story from the anthology. This one also is very much like one of those time capsule stories from the development of the story engine deck for me. Because I started writing it actually in 2019, almost exactly 1 year before Story Engine launched. And I finished it almost exactly 1 year later, because I remember I posted it in October, the year that Story Engine launched in 2019. 2018 is when I started writing it. 2019 is when I finished it. And I started it exactly 1 year before launching the Story Engine. I finished it, I think, while launching the Story Engine. And I remember 2019 was the start of the nosedive into the bad year of, 2018 was the start of the nosedive into the bad year of 2019. Because my dog had terminal cancer, hadn't passed away yet. But my wife had moved to the UK ahead of me because I was staying with our dog to see him through some palliative chemo to see if we could get him in good enough shape to travel with us to the UK because she had to start school in September. So in September, I was like living in my parents' basement with a dying dog, apart from my wife. The legal rumblings of the situation that I sort of gestured towards were starting to happen, and things were starting to look like very bad and grim. And I remember being like out on a jog, just like trying to like physical activity. Maybe I'll feel a little better if I can get work out some of these demons jogging. And I remember like having this weird moment where like a set of words came to me, and they like very much like a thunderbolt moment. Like it didn't feel like the words were coming from inside me. It felt like it came from an external source. And the words were, "And when you survive this, and when you survive this," and it felt like a line from a poem. And I remember like stopping and like getting into my phone and just putting it in the notes app right away. And being like, where is this coming from? And I remember like sitting down and trying to write with those words when they first came to me, like after the jog, and not being able to make a ton of sense of them. I made some progress on like writing this like kind of like a poem basically. And it felt like it was this message about like, you're going to be fine. It's going to suck. All this is going to suck, but eventually it'll be over and you'll survive this. And I remember like at the time, not really believing it as I was writing it. Like I was writing it and I just felt far too hopeless to actually like internalize that as like a thing that I actually believed. But I wrote some of the words down, and it felt to a certain extent like I got some comfort from it. Like it felt like my future self was like sending me some hope on credit and being like, trust me, it's going to work out. I've got like hope to spare. I'm going to send you some. That's literally like it felt like I was time traveling and just like borrowing some resources from the future. And future me was sending these like words of comfort. And that was September of 2018, exactly 1 year before launching the Story Engine. And I remember finding that note as I was working on the Story Engine launch in September, and being like, feeling for the first time like I was excited again, and I was motivated to write again. I'm thinking like, I think I can finish this. And I worked on it in September, and I remember I remember posting it in October during the Story Engine campaign, just as one of my weekly stories on Story Engine, on shorteststory.com. And like this, I closed the time loop. Like I actually was able to like write with conviction the things that I had needed to believe in 2018 when I like was feeling very hopeless and depressed. I like actually like was able to say those things to myself, like, you are going to be okay, kid, and like feel it and believe it and like close that loop. And so it's become one of those really important stories to me to share, because I do think it is like your future self probably does have this figured out. And if you're in like your shitty hell year, not every year is going to be a shitty hell year. That's going to be over at some point. You know, better things are coming, and like your job right now is probably just to like survive it, like hang on till the end of it, wait it out, make what moves you can to make things better. But sometimes it's waiting out circumstances that are going to change, and holding on to hope for the future. And you know, your future self owes you. Your future self owes you for hanging on and being in it when things are difficult. So borrow as much inspiration and hope and good vibes as you need from your future self, because they owe you for getting to be where they are. And this is a story kind of about that and closing that loop. So, and when you survive this. Here we go. When you survive this, it will not be because someone said you could, although it's good to be reminded from time to time. And when you survive this, it will not be because you had money in the bank or a roof over your head, because there may come a time when you have neither, and still you will survive this. And when you survive this, it will not be for family nor friends, although at times their kindness will be the only candle you carry. And when you survive this, it will not be because of your enemies, nor because you held on to spite so hard that the world was deafened by the crack of your knuckles, although a little anger now and then is good for the circulation. No, when you survive this, and you will survive this, it will be for yourself. It will be because the difference between how far you've come and surviving this is one more step, and one more, and one more, until one day you look back to where you stand right now, make eye contact, and nod, because you deserve to know that there is a world where you have already survived this. On the far shore of this calamity, there is a place where your greatest trial is washing the garden soil from under your fingernails, or choosing a book to take to bed. On the far shore of this calamity, there are others who will need you to be their only candle, their roof, their reminder that they will survive this, even though they can't believe you because the hope is too terrible to bear. On the far shore of this calamity, you are looking back in admiration at yourself right now, muddling through with grace and grit and grim determination. And you are smiling because you know the secret of how you survive this, and one day you will have the chance to share it. I'm getting a little teary over here. That one always kind of does it to me. That, and there's a kind of like a eulogy for my dog in the book. That's I could never make it through that one on I've never read it out loud. I think I tried once. I don't remember how it went, but yeah. So that's the story.
I heard Eric literally like make a little huffy chuckle when you read the line about, I think when you're saying like
anger
in the world, and I was like, I feel like Eric is calling me out with that laugh.
It's not what I did. It's a good line.
I was like, I feel like Eric's like, I know someone who acts like that, and that's probably Murray.
I know lots of people who act like that.
There's definitely a lot. I definitely very jokingly regularly say that like all the goals in my life is just my very long plotted revenge against the world.
There's a line in the American Gods TV show, which we're not going to mention too much more for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. But like I think it's Orlando Jones, or the actor playing Anansi, brings it, where he basically just has a whole speech that I think he kind of wrote for himself, where it's anger gets shit done.
Yeah,
is kind of the mantra. Yeah. He's giving a pep talk to a bunch of people, but it's like he's like, anger gets shit done.
Yeah, I get a lot done when angry. I'm pretty sure most of my most productive days is when I'm angry. And I mean, like, I will not dive into the very long and complicated things about being a marginalized person and how sometimes, because I think like there's a lot, I think the whole thing about when you will survive this, and what I like about it, is the balance of understanding that you have emotions that sometimes are very raw and very painful, and you should acknowledge them. I don't believe in ignoring or trying to suppress your emotions for the sake of positivity. I think there's something very powerful and healing about feeling your emotions. But it also, there is like the hope element where it's like you do at some point need to turn into another direction and look to the sunlight a little bit and realize that the sun rises, and put things in a different perspective, where sometimes, you will have survived this and someday you might be the candle for someone else. And I think it is important. I like, and that's why I say a lot of things I say, like I get a lot of things done like through anger, and like that's completely true. And, to Orlando Jones's point, right? When he says anger gets shit done, it obviously has to do with being a Black man. And there's a lot of validity to that claim. But I definitely remember there's some podcasts and like audios that I often listen to about productivity, success, and just trying to work at becoming a better version of myself day to day. And I remember there was like one quite prolific speaker that kind of has been through it all, like been through the worst of the worst. And I can't remember exactly all the conditions. And he's a very successful person now, but I think at the time, like, he either had like the most terminal cancer ever, or no, sorry, he was in like the most horrific accident ever. Like, I think it left him paralyzed. It destroyed his body. I think he had brain damage. And then he actually managed to come back from that. Like, he, I think, managed to retrain himself to walk and regain a lot of his cognitive ability, and then got diagnosed with like a terminal cancer, right? It was just like a thing and a thing. And I remember one of the things he always said is like, you feel it, you realize it's the worst thing in the world, you feel it for X amount of time, and then you are like, okay, I have felt all of that now we move on to the next step, right? So the wonderful thing is, obviously, you have survived this. You more than survived this. You now thrived this.
Yeah,
I feel like
it's been such a good 5 years. Like,
yeah,
you showed 2019 who's boss.
Yeah,
there should be a sequel that says you now thrive this.
Yes.
And
you'll survive this too. Now you thrive this in the theaters.
It's like you will survive this too, now with more bullets.
Yeah. This is exclusively focusing on the part about anger. Yeah.
Wow, that went in another. I thought we were going to talk about sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah. The sequel always has to, but you have to like up the stakes for the sequel. It's everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just the action movie 101.
Rainbow laser beams are a very powerful thing. Have you seen those Care Bears at work? Like, really now?
Yeah.
So, wow. I think it's time to bust out the blueberry deck.
I think it's time for the blueberry deck, friends. So
we actually should have gotten, instead of like a cake, we should have just gotten blueberries.
I like
put a candle with blueberries.
Let's all become creative in the middle of the live stream.
Yeah.
Probably because we all get a on camera. Well, yeah, and I mean, to be fair, like the thing that I know we said we aren't gonna bring out the new child, but like Lore Master's deck is most certainly been kind of at the forefront of all our brains recently, since we are in the heart of fulfillment. And making sure that everything is safely on a not capsizing boat this time, and that I have negotiated with every single little freight forwarder and border patrol and everything to make sure that boats are going to land where they're going to land, and in key times. So, it's fine. We'll just have to, I don't know, Story Engine extra. Well, Story Engine will get a really good birthday next year. How about that?
It's like, we'll make it up to you.
I'll make it up to you.
We'll get you a pony.
Yeah. We'll get a pony for the Story Engine next year. I think that's perfect. No, I think one blueberry for its birthday next year is more than enough.
But it'll be a big blueberry.
Well, yeah. The world's biggest blueberry, I'm pretty sure, is like an hour away from me. It's like a big roadside blueberry sculpture. In, I want to say, Oxford, Nova Scotia.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can get a picture of the Story Engine with the world's biggest blueberry at some point.
I thought you were just gonna steal the biggest blueberry.
It is bigger than any vehicle that I can imagine driving.
Is it a real blueberry? Or is it just a sculpture of a blueberry?
It is a sculpture of a blueberry.
Eric.
I don't know. Some of those like pumpkins get like.
Here, let me introduce you to the blueberry deck. So we have the green cards are our. I think I accidentally nudged the view.
I was gonna be like, wow, we just have developed a new way of laying us out.
So we've got the agent cards, which were, I think, still called agent cards at the time. The only difference was they had one main queue in the middle that was like the primary queue, and then they ended up with satellite queues along the edges. There's 5 per card, but I didn't like how that created.
What is a main queue and a satellite queue?
So I actually think this is interesting, because like the deck still functions like this a little bit.
Yeah, the queue that's like written at the bottom is kind of the default queue, and you'll notice that most of the words that are in the middle of these cards are now at the bottoms of Story Engine cards, and then one other card was cut, one queue was cut to make it fit.
I
like
never
the-
knew that the
the-
bottom queue was supposed to be like the queue.
Well, it's not that. It's more like all the like 4 cues are usually grouped around a theme of some kind.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
It's all
they're grouped
variations
around
on
the
a theme.
theme.
But usually the bottom queue is the most general of them. Usually the bottom queue announces the theme, and then the other ones are like slightly more specific takes on it.
I feel
But
like
this
I
is
just learned something new about the deck today.
it's meant to be invisible design. Like it's a part of how the deck works. Is like it starts you here, and then you think
Guys,
oh,
like,
remixing things,
everyone
but
who's
it
in
doesn't
chat-
it doesn't draw attention to itself. As a
Everyone
design
in chat,
feature.
take notes. We're gonna run like I don't know. Next year we're gonna like, or at some point in the future, we're just gonna run like some weird, like super obscure trivia of Story Engine,
Yeah.
and have some really cool prize for the people who can learn, who has like learned our obscure takes on the Story Engine, because I had no freaking clue that this was a thing.
Yeah, and this was an iteration that never saw public use. I only ever showed this to like individual people when I was sort of playtesting or getting feedback. These are the engine cards.
It's also an illustrative example. It's like you can have references for yourself in your original copy, and then but you just take it away, it becomes invisible.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. And actually, that was part of the goal. Was I thought it'd be a helpful structure for using the cards, but it didn't need to be announced or described.
Peter, why is this so uneven?
I think I probably like thought of a cue, got really excited and wrote it, and then remembered that I'd have to put it upside down, and then just didn't want to waste a card. So again, this is the environmentalist in me. So I just like wrote tiny instead, and then also edited this idea, so it got really bad. So you'll notice though, engine cards don't just have wants. They used to have like just ises, like this character is forbidden from. But I eventually realized that like this needed, and sometimes I would try to bake obstacles into the what became the engine. So I eventually reformatted this so that all the cards were wants to, and we're focused on what the character wants, because then you could interpret that in a variety of different ways. But I think it works much better being motivation focused. When I used to write wants cards, they were often using the word seeks, which I thought was just too much of a $10 word compared to wants. I wanted it to be very, I wanted the language to be not to draw attention to itself, so you could focus on the meaning instead.
I think this is where I can tell where I have more of an engineer brain than your artist brain, because the moment I would have realized I needed to do something on each side, I probably would have taken every pink card and drawn a line dead in the middle.
I think some of these pre-existed. I think originally some of these may have just been like there's only gonna be one on a card.
Right.
I'm guessing that's what this one is from and this one is from, and then eventually
and
you'll
then
see
when it gets when it feels more balanced, it's when it's like being molded.
When I have it figured out, yeah. I'm also like, I think there's 3 or 4 different pens that I worked with on this, so you'll see different line thicknesses and brush tips. And then anchors are very similar, except that I think I would do like this card only has location-based anchors. It doesn't have a mix of object and location. This anchor only has like object-based ones, no locations. Eventually we mixed every card so it had some objects, some locations, so that you could, if you needed a particular kind of anchor, you would have one available on that card no matter what. The aspects are more or less unchanged. They work very similarly to how they did before. And then conflicts came in later, and I think that's why I just grabbed a stack of envelopes and wrote on them. One of these even has a giant footprint on it. I think this one, the footprint the dust has mostly come off by now. But apparently at some point I just like stepped on it on the floor.
as one does.
And these ones I think are very similar to what the final draft ended up looking like. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's make a prompt. Let's start with our figure card. I'm going to shuffle these up. Oh yeah, also some of them I took the effort to cut into squares. And other ones I did not.
I think that's the funniest thing so far. It's like the uneven cards.
All right. Here we go. So go ahead and we're gonna vote for this in the chat, but don't vote until we count down 3, 2, 1, go. And then it'll be the first entry to get 3. Yeah. And there's 5 choices here. So we have a traveler as the main prompt in the middle, a collector, a wanderer, a sailor, or a merchant. So again, that's a traveler, a collector, a wanderer, a sailor, or a merchant. And you can go ahead and vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
I would be super impressed for people who like remember, who knows which of any of these like prototypes ended up in the main deck, and actually can say like these ones ended up in the main deck, these ones didn't end up in the main deck, because I probably can't even say that.
So Collector made it in on a different card. Merchant made it in on a different card. Wanderer made it in on a different card. Traveler got cut because we edited the Story Engine deck at the final pre-printing phase to
Right.
remove any word that had a regional spelling. And Traveler with one L or two are spelled differently in Canada, the UK, and the States. And I wanted the deck to be universal because it was really important that it could work in schools, and the schools would not have a problem with the language regionalization. So Traveler got cut for that reason. And then eventually I think we rescinded that rule for Lore Master's deck because it was
We
less
did.
integration focused. And I think Traveler made it into Lore Master's deck because it was still available because we didn't use it in Story Engine because of the regionalization.
And I think we went with American spelling, so
yeah,
because it was like words like traveler and then anything with like neighbor or anything that a lot of OU decks or OU words
made it into Lore Masters because they were held out of Story Engine. So Collector, Wanderer,
I think
Collector,
Wanderer
got the 3 first, so the Collector has more votes.
Yeah, and I will quickly show you just for interest's sake. Oh, actually, yeah, here is... Oh, no, that doesn't have the Merchant. Hold on. I will very quickly show you. That's the final Merchant card. This is the Wanderer card. And this is the... No, I won't spend too much time searching. There is a.
I'm gonna be like, this is good. This might end up getting very long if we have to go do this for every single card.
Oh, I promise you we won't. I promise you we won't. Okay.
Don't worry, we're going to.
I think Collector's actually missing from my deck. Yikes.
Oh, we just learned something new today too.
Oh, you know what? I pulled some prompts to record videos with later. I think it might be in those prompts. Okay, Wanderer and Merchant. So those are just for example, but we're going to use a Wanderer. Next up, we will give him his motivation. This one's got some editing done. Seeks to finally tell the truth about something, or seeks to deceive someone about something.
3, 2, 1, go. I guess we should give people the prompt.
And another little weird thing I'm realizing, the engine cards were written only to work with anchor cards afterwards. Yeah, Collector's on the Hunter card. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so these sentences only had to make sense followed by an object or location. They did not have to make sense followed by a person, like another agent. That was a function that I added in a later iteration of the deck.
I also like how when you design the cards, they like right now work interchangeably lengthwise or widthwise right now.
They kind of have to because yeah.
I think Deceive might have gotten it. Yeah.
Okay.
We are deceptive.
Seeks to deceive someone about. We will draw our anchor card. A trinket, a locket, a pocket watch, a pipe, or a ring. So again, that's a trinket, a locket, a pocket watch, a pipe, or a ring. We'll vote in 3, 2, 1, go!
I know there's definitely moments in the Story Engine deck where like there's moments where the anchor cards, where sometimes the engine card will tie in hypothetically better with almost another agent card, and then you get an anchor card, and you almost have to like, it does challenge your mind a different way as well in terms of like how it works.
Yeah.
But it definitely is one of those where I realize how quick, like for Story Engine, there's definitely a lot more opportunities to, because I know in the guidebook, there's a lot of different ways that you can do the trajectory of the Story Engine, as opposed to just kind of going like agent, engine, anchor, but you know your whole like a soul divided and all of that, and definitely where you find moments where you're like, wow, I really could pull the agent card or something like that.
Yeah, and that was a friend of mine who has a story in the Story Engine anthology, Centane Quintana. He was the one so he's a tarot reader. He had a lot of experience tarot reading. He was the one who suggested, hey, what if you did spreads that had different shapes and formats? And he was the one who drew my attention to that as a possibility. So yeah, credit where credit's due. This draft was one of the ones that I think he gave me comments on. That helps a lot of those initial special sort of prompt recipes develop. Cool. So next up, we'd normally draw a conflict card, but I think to honor the spirit of the original deck, where conflicts got added later, and I just forgot that they should be in there, we're going to draw an anchor card, or no, not an anchor, an aspect card, because that is just the order that I wrote the cards in.
It's actually the order how I still demo the deck. I
interesting.
actually do the conflict card last because I like doing the little like spicy juice. It's like because I always feel like when I'm putting conflict cards in, I'm literally spicing up the prompt. So your way is my way.
Yeah, actually, here's a question for the chat that I would love to get some people's thoughts on. What rules do you ignore, or which rules do you break or change for your own creative purposes when you're using the decks? This can be Story Engine or any of our decks. I love hearing how people deviate from the rules as written. I do it all the time. We all have our ways of customizing the deck to our use, and I love hearing more about that. So please in the chat, if you want to share anything that you do that's kind of off recipe or your own flourish, I'd love to hear about it. Let us know.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because in some ways I'm cardinal opposite. I'm such like a rules follower type person. I like being told what to do, and that was in the very very early iterations of you presenting Lore Master deck prototypes to me. I think you kind of went into Lore Master's deck and then kind of went into like you were like here's level 1, but also here's level 8. And you went off like and deviated and came up with all these alternative ideas, and I got to a point where I was like, Peter,
back to the core functionality.
Walk to the beginning. I don't actually know what this deck does because you've already shown me the advanced version.
Yeah. Lore Master's deck, it can do so many cool things, and it helps to explain those one cool thing at a time.
Like I wanted to learn how to color an apple in a coloring book, and then you were trying to teach me oil painting about 3 steps in.
But oil's such a good medium to work with.
It's almost like it doesn't dry for 3 days, and you can continue blending days later.
Well, we can add a happy little cloud to our painting here, and happy is an adjective, like what appears on the aspect stack. Transition. So we'll go ahead and vote on an aspect here. So this can apply to the Wanderer or the Ring. It can be maddening, rejuvenating, I think spelled wrong. I'm pretty sure it's spelled wrong.
It is.
Charming, or curious. So please go ahead and vote for maddening, rejuvenating, charming, or curious. If you do vote for rejuvenating, you have to spell it wrong. Vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, no vote has ever been spelled wrong on any one of these we've ever done.
I know, it's almost like everyone in the chat is like, we're writers, people, or we're like campaign people. We cannot, for a moment, spell anything wrong. I was expecting everyone to be team rejuvenating. Yeah, Raymond, rejuvenating.
You got it.
I think maddening got it.
Yes, I think you are right. Okay.
Oh, wait. Did we vote for whether it's supposed to be for a Wanderer or the Ring?
We did not.
We have not yet voted.
Okay. Vote for whether it should be a maddening Wanderer or a maddening Ring. 3, 2, 1, go. Actually, this is an interesting question. Like, when you built the aspect card, did you think from the get-go it was going to describe a figure card and the anchor, or did you have, like, different thoughts of how it was going to work?
Yeah, I always wanted it to work for either one of those cards, and from the get-go, and even, like,
Ring 1, and I'm now realizing that we have created Gollum.
We totally have! Actually, also Bilbo, because he's the one who lies about what he has in his pockets is.
Yeah.
Yeah. This could truly be any ring madness afflicted hobbit. Oh, very interesting.
I'm gonna send a letter to J.R.R. Tolkien of the past and be like, here's a message from the future that says you should write the story.
And then I'm gonna give a vote here between. I'm gonna draw 2 cards for the conflict and let people vote. Okay, so. But it goes against everything they stand for. But their own family stands in the way. Oh my, he kills Deagle in the scene where he gets the ring. Smeagol kills Deagle in the scene where he gets the ring, and they were like brothers to each other. They may actually literally have been brothers. It's wild. But it is forbidden by law. But they do not fulfill the terms of the prophecy. I think most of these exist in the final deck. In very similar phrasing. So one more time, you can type in stand for, family, forbidden, or prophecy. And you can vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
They also all weirdly have like Lord of the Ring vibes to it in some way.
Yeah. I think law is probably the only one that doesn't feel as Lord of the Ringsy to me, but everything else definitely fits in that like high fantasy Tolkien.
Well, we definitely got prophecy.
Okay.
People were waiting for that one.
Oh, interesting. Because like, and there's no real way to make this fit, so we're just gonna do that. It reads across and then down. So I like this as the this person claims that they are the one who's supposed to be the ring bearer, and like they are not. And the lie is them claiming that they are supposed to be the one who's like carrying the ring, and they actually just like want it for themselves.
It's like this. It's like Boromir in the movie.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. And Faramir eventually chooses to turn away from the ring. He does what Boromir could not do. I'm about to start just spouting opinions about Lord of the Rings if we keep on this track. But yeah. No, I like that. There's some very good Lord of the Rings vibes here. Some Hobbit as well.
It's time to just rewrite Lord of the Rings, our version.
Amazon's
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah. Lord of the Rings remastered.
It's true. Well, you know, if there's anything I'll also say, like this old version of the deck makes for a more like visually, graphically dynamic layout.
Yes, it does look like a crazy person wrote it.
I was trying to say art, just trying to say like modern pop art, but
we should make a version of the deck that comes with little yarn and thumbtacks.
Yeah, so you can do a conspiracy board.
Yeah,
my wife has commented numerous times that my writing looks like either a serial killer or a ransom note. Like someone attempted to, and this looks like a ransom note. Like, yeah, eccentric.
Eric's really not that much better, to be fair.
I used to be better, and I think my hand actually is like atrophied for like writing muscles, like with like physical writing.
Yeah, actually, I mean, to be honest, so is mine. My writing has gotten worse over the years, but I also have a habit now where I write a lot of shorthand, thinking I will understand my own shorthand later, and I don't. So I'll write a bunch of things in shorthand and come back to it later and be like, I don't actually know what code I've told myself. So I could either be the best or the worst spy because it's like I can't, or Secret Service, because I can't even remember the own secrets I write myself. Whoopsie.
So. A huge problem in the lab.
I don't know. You know what's nice is like, yeah, it's the deck actually functions pretty well.
It worked. I think the biggest thing that would be missing is the ability to build prompts that go from an agent to an agent, because you want these character dynamics you can build really fluidly, and this deck just wasn't balanced for that. I think also the object cards being loaded with like only an object. Sorry, the anchor cards being loaded with only an object or only location prompts also didn't work. So mixing the portfolio of the card, I think, was another huge breakthrough. But otherwise, still basic and still functional on a basic.
The envelopes were the very earliest version of the sleeves. I realized you could create a little prompt and then stuff it on the envelope.
You know what? I have to remember to take a picture of this later, so I'm just gonna stick that in there. There we go.
There you go.
Story. It's a feature, not a bug.
Oh my god! I just like you're usually the ones who comes up with like crazy ideas, but now I'm beginning to see visions in the future where we like create some sort of greeting card system where we send mail little prompts in an envelope to people.
I was gonna say like a little tuck system, like when you put like if you have like a trading card or baseball cards, like you put them in a binder, but we just have like a binder that has like little like it's laid out so you can tuck things.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It becomes an add-in for our journals or something when like people want to have their prompts put. Oh my god. I know I definitely know we've had one. I think it was actually your wife Jasmine that came up with the suggestion that said we should like develop the accessory of accessories, which is building a giant board that you can put like prompts in, and then you can kind of put store your prompt so it can be laid out, and then you can like still eat and stuff on top of it. And I was like, that's the dream. Can you imagine? But maybe it's because I live in a condo that my brain also can't conceptualize wanting to create large tables, because I'm like, but then where do they go?
Yeah. Also from Evil Kitty Girl here. I remember reading this in there's a Discord run by the Story Engine community that has some just lovely folks sharing their prompts and talking about how they use the decks. And I think I remember seeing this come up in there, and it was a really delightful piece. But yeah, do check out our or not our, but the community's Discord if you have a chance, because there's some wonderful folks there who love to talk about writing and writing inspiration. The other thing I want to quickly go back to is so Moose's way of hacking the deck or using the deck in their own way is sometimes after I draw a card, I will rotate a previous card if it's better, which I highly encourage actually. Revising your choices as new information comes out, very smart. I highly recommend that. Bronwyn likes to make a couple of different stacks at the same time for different characters in the story, which I've also done before, like treating them as little nodes where like you stack all their motivation together and then another character and kind of map them out. So that can also be really effective as well. So good hacks, people. I like it. And I think we're about to start. I think we'll do a couple quick prompts using the main deck, and we'll mix in some boosters because I've realized we haven't gotten to play with the boosters very much. But before we do, something that I'm curious about, just because I've had a lot of like projects that I've worked on for a very long time that were like I've had writer's block on them. What is the like work in progress that you've been working on for the longest? Like, what is the not you've not been able to crack yet in your own creative writing or creative work? I would love to hear about that in the chat if anyone wants to share anything that they've been like working or stalled on. Because I love hearing about which projects people are still grinding away on. I know I've got a couple drawer stories that way. But
I have some stories where sometimes I worry their relevance is gonna run out. It's like I would say that there's this manifesto isn't the right word, but like there's this one fantasy story that I had started writing many years ago, and I would say that it would probably be the book I would love to see published someday. And not like I've long since given up the writing dream for now. I'm never say never. But there's definitely sometimes moments where I'm like, I don't know if this story is still like relevant or interesting, even though it's fantasy. And I guess like fantasy is relevant, interesting in its own way, but I worry about that sometimes. That's like that's one thing I would say if there was like a story that I've grounded in the works.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. There's definitely themes that I've like written about that I'm like that the world's relationship and my relationship to that theme have changed.
I also will say to also writers, if you think your story isn't relevant yet because you've never seen other work on it, that's the time to put it out. That's the time to be a pioneer. Because one thing I remember wanting to actually I did write something at one point where I wrote like this kind of like Canadian history style, like, circa beginning to build the railroad, steamy kind of like actiony but like steamy romance. Maybe inspiration for a romance expansion packs one day because it was so steamy between like a butler worked for Canadian aristocracy and like an assassin they got from China. And I remember thinking at the time, like, who wants to read a story about like the crossing of cultures between Chinese people and like early Canadian history? Because there just simply wasn't, right? Like if you think about the early days of like if you watch things like Murdoch mysteries and stuff, they just never had people of different races it's a very whitewashy thing to do because historically Chinese people did build the railroad, but in fiction it was never shown that way, right? But now there's like literally, I think what's that one TV series you watched that had like Daniel martial artist? It was in the West. It was very cowboy.
Warriors.
Sure, that's what it was called. I clearly didn't watch it.
But was it the one with like in Chinatown in San Francisco?
Possibly, but it was very westerny.
There was also Winona Earp, but I don't think that's what you're thinking.
I don't think it was Anyways, I remember seeing a TV series like a couple years that Eric was watching a couple years ago, just being like, "Is that a bunch of like Chinese people doing kung fu and martial arts in the Wild Wild West?"
I think that's Warrior.
Yeah, and you just realize that at some point these things like those stories matter and they do exist, and just because someone didn't publish it at the time. Sometimes it's because the industry, like the world wasn't ready for it, and our world's constantly changing, or sometimes it just means you should just be a pioneer, just put that dang thing out anyways. I think that way about music. Sometimes there's opera metal songs where I compose and sometimes being like, this doesn't sound very opera metal-y or like opera metal-y at the time, and then I'll literally listen to my favorite band come up with those same riffs like and publish and release an album years later, and I'm like, dang you. So anyways, some really great stories coming in from chat that I noticed you guys are sharing. which is all I can say is all those little projects you should all go back.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
Oh, it could be. I did watch that as well.
JWR Into the Badlands. That sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Yes. And Francesca saying there's stories that from your teens and still want to work on them. That's great. And you bought Deck of Worlds. You have a lot of world building to do. So do it.
Yeah.
Now you do. Now you have it. That's great. Eric, do you have any stories locked in the drawer?
I mean, I worked on and off on a novel for years, and I never really cracked it. But I did write like 80 or 100,000 words of it. Still kind of figuring out what the like. I still really like the first couple of chapters and the premise. Like I've gone back and looked at it a couple times, but I haven't really figured out what the story set there is. But it was basically the starting point was because like so many fantasy, like to go back to Lord of the Rings, so many fantasy like books or series end with like the hero leaves, they get on the boat and they go to like the land of the elves, and basically the premise was like, what if you did that, but then they just didn't realize the world was round, and so they just end up somewhere else. And so like one of like the whole point was like basically like dealing with the disappointment of like you didn't ascend to heaven or like paradise. You just had to like keep going.
Yeah.
After you killed Sauron.
Yeah.
Basically.
I like the idea of like the disrupting kind of the archetypal myth rhythm of a story like that. And be like, no, things keep going. Stories don't quite end like that in the real world. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It well, you know what I was thinking? I actually was making that commentary when we were watching The Acolyte, like the new Star Wars show. Because this one, it's like it was a prequel, right? So it was like hundreds of years ago, and things were peaceful, and there was a thing, and then this conflict is arriving, and I'm like, Star Wars, it's always about conflict. It's like 30 years in the future, there was peace, and now there's conflict. 20 years ago, there was peace, and there was conflict. Hundreds of years ago, there was peace, and I was like, but that is our world. Like our world literally is that. Like it's not like what they're like the happily ever after fairy tale is never actually that. A real world actually regularly has conflict, and then like one group comes into power, and then the other group comes into power, and then the other group comes into power again. And that's, you know, I think we operate on a little bit of a duality that way.
Yeah. There's a reason they don't call it Star Piece.
Star what? Star Piece?
Yeah. It's always conflict. Star Wars.
To be fair, the second Avatar movie, I actually said to Eric, I was like, I think I would have actually enjoyed this movie more if it was just like a peaceful nature documentary style of being like, and then we went on this planet. Here's the native whale swim, and you just looked at the really, really high quality CGI, and it's just like, and now look at the like Navi just peacefully picking their trees, and this is their hunter-gatherer ways. And that was just the movie. I did not need the conflict in that movie. I felt like the conflict was contrived and needed to stick it in just so they could appease the audience who wanted the boom bangs. And I was just like, I could have just watched the entire movie like narrated by Morgan Freeman and just being like, and now like here's the song whale swimming by.
It's like it's actually based on something that hasn't been done yet. Is somebody just takes like sound clips from Planet Earth and matches them up to the entire cut of Avatar.
Nice. Yeah.
Just like that's the thing that should exist. Or sorry, was it Blue Planet? What's the like one?
There's several.
Yeah.
Blue Planet and Blue Planet is basically the ocean's version of Planet Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like footage from that like spliced with Avatar to see if you can get a full 3-hour documentary of very soothing British man explaining the zoology of this place.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say about 70% of the movie was that. And then they just kind of stuck the conflict into it because they needed conflict. So if there's any time for Moroki to say the conflict card doesn't exist in the Avatar movie.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
But it looks so good.
Well, that's why no conflict is necessary. We didn't want to see it blow up. Okay, let's build some prompts using Story Engine Deck and some boosters. Did you have boosters in mind, Peter, that you were pulling? Oh
no,
yes.
I thought we'd vote actually.
Oh,
That'd
nice.
be fun to vote. So maybe what we'll do is we'll vote on one from this is the founder set. These are the original 6 that released with the Kickstarter campaign in 2019. So you can go ahead and vote in the chat for mythology, dystopian, post-apocalyptic, eldritch horror, cyberpunk, or steampunk. Again, that's mythology, dystopian, post-apocalyptic, eldritch horror, cyberpunk, or steampunk. And you can vote in 3, 2, 1, go. And then we'll vote for one from the new block as well, and we'll make a little genre cocktail together.
Yeah, and if you don't have the story, if you're looking at completing your story engine collection, or you're just looking into the story engine and seeing whether the deck is going to be something you want to add to your writing or campaign building toolbox, for the story engine birthday, we are having a sale, because what's better way to celebrate than by offering sales? It's 10%. Anything from the story engine series, so that's either the core deck, story engine deck, all 6 expansions, all 12 boosters,
Yes, never mind.
I only am allowed one mistake, and I already called Lore Masters deck of Worlds once. So 12 boosters and the story engine playmat, or any of the 2 folding boxes from the story engine series. So yeah, and the discount should automatically populate upon checkout. Okay, so is that the first booster that made it?
That is our first winner.
Eldritch Horror 1. So now
definitely, I think one of the more popular ones we've made.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
all our horror are the ones that we made. And speaking of horror, if you like things all scary and creepy and dark and horror-esque, make sure, I think our next live stream will most likely be around Halloween. We did one last year where we did prompts basically all horror generated to create the most terrifying tales that you can imagine. So I don't know if we actually set the date for that. My brain says around Halloween, mostly because my brain doesn't really think past October 27th right now.
For those who don't know, Maroki and Eric are getting married. So I'm going to be trying to force them to take some time off.
What?
So the Halloween live stream might be me solo or me with a guest who's not them, because they should be enjoying their time.
It should be just 2 really creepy stuffed puppets. That look like
Yes, yeah. And I talk to them as though they're responding to me, but no one can hear what they're saying except for me. Perfect. Great.
The camera's like on. There's like
Nailed it.
us, but it's just like creepy stuffed puppets.
Perfect.
And then like make it like have like videos of the puppet in advance, and then just like change it every now and then.
Oh,
so
I don't like that.
The puppets are doing things with it.
No, thank you. No.
Thank
it's funny
you,
when it's not my phobia. It's not funny when it is my phobia.
Oh, fair enough.
We have the option for horror again here. We have 6 boosters from the Dreamer block of expansions. So these came out at the same time as Deck of Worlds. I'd had some requests for more subgenres for boosters, and I wanted to be able to acknowledge those with this wonderful set. So we have superhero, gothic, military sci-fi, western, pulp fiction, and fairy tale. So again, that's superhero, gothic, military sci-fi, western, pulp fiction, and fairy tale. And you can vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
And I also want to thank you, everyone who's writing all the congratulatory comments. It means a lot, especially since right now I'm very, very overwhelmed. Planning weddings are a thing, guys. And I'm sure there's a lot of story. If you guys ever write weddings for your characters in your world and you say it went by without a hitch and it was easy, you are all wrong. This planning weddings is filled with conflict cards and filled with drama and controversy and in events blowing up all the time. I'm sure I could draw any kind of conflict card out of a deck and be like, yes, that actually is a thing that happened in weddings. This has also happened in Thing and Wedding. Now I feel like doing that. Now I just feel like whipping out conflict cards and being like, yes, that did happen in the middle of wedding planning. You're wrong.
Oh, wow. I think it's still tied. Hold on.
It's still tied. I think a 4-way tie sitting on 2. We have 2 for Pulp Fiction, 2 for Fairy Tales, 2 for the Western deck, and 2 for superheroes.
Okay.
Raymond, I like how Raymond's like on there, like doing the
counting.
counting.
All right. Let's have Maroki. You vote the tiebreaker here.
I vote the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Superhero. Western.
We just got a 3rd Fairy Tale.
Okay. Fairy tales.
I'll let someone else decide it. Local. See, Evil Kitty Girl, that does sound much chiller, much easier, but a lot of things could have gone wrong. Just because there's 6 people, that doesn't mean that there won't be some things that happen.
What if Five Guys doesn't let you eat if you're a group of 6?
I actually made a horrible mistake where I ordered our marriage license, and for some reason they didn't allow it to be picked in. See, there was a challenge there. But I couldn't pick it in our home city in the Toronto area, so I picked it in like the city of Grimsby because it's near wine country, and I was like, I'll go out there semi-frequently and I can pick up our marriage license there. And completely forgot that city halls don't open on weekends, which is usually when I have to head out there. And I was like, wow, now I have to go out randomly on a weekday to Grimsby. There's not that much in Grimsby. I'm sorry to anyone from Grimsby who's heard this live stream, but there's a cute pub in there. There's a cute little downtown, but there's not that much in Grimsby. Maybe except one of my favorite wineries.
That's us using our platform to fire strays at Grimsby, Ontario. But complimenting their winery, so that's nice.
Yes. Suddenly we get a downtick in sales from really specifically Grimsby, Ontario.
Yeah, for one specific postcode, because the whole town is like one postcode, right?
Oh God!
Going after Grimsby, baby. Okay, let's crack these open. The boosters were another thing that during production, the factory had the suggestion for this really cool format of packaging. I call it the Lotus Fold. You fold out all 4 sides, and there's this very cool large-scale image in the middle that comes together across all the different panels. And then we've got our cards here and a little guidebook for how to use them. But essentially, we're just going to mix cards together. Grimsby is a great name for an Eldritch setting. And this is the...
It's true. I think if anyone writes a Grimsby setting, I think we will up the reputation of Grimsby substantially.
Yeah.
There actually might be like a Grimsby in Connecticut now that I think about it.
Comment in the chat with your favorite Grimsby.
It's like your favorite Springfield, but it's Grimsby.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of Granby. Never mind.
It's okay. We have decided now that these characters all live in Grimsby.
It's official.
Okay.
It is official.
We're going to tell these stories about these eldritch horror and fairy tale folks who live in Grimsby.
Let's do it. And I think we'll alternate cards every other, or maybe we'll do 2 and 2 because I want to be able to get one image card from each deck. So from the Eldritch Horror deck, we have a Cultists, a Thrall, a Villager, or an Initiate. So you can go ahead and vote for Cultist, Thrall, Villager, or Initiate in 3, 2, 1, go.
When you created some of the like Eldritch Horror, do you ever feel like that some of those come with more of a PG rating than a G rating? Like, I know it's something we've discussed about the deck before when, especially when I think like we're doing some initial testing, and especially when we were working with Indigo, which is, for those of you in the States or abroad, Indigo is kind of like the Barnes and Noble of Canada. And I remember they were asking us like what age groups, or even because we use the decks and the decks are really great for school settings and for educators. I know a lot of people ask like how, what's the age for using the deck? And I know generally like, I would say the deck can be used for all ages. Obviously like, I think, I always say like 10 and up for sure, like, or even 12 and up will definitely be able to use the deck. But obviously if there's an 8-year-old who wants to write stories, they can use it too. But I've always hesitated a little bit being like, yes, and you can write horror with it as well, because I've never flipped through all the cards, so I never know if I'm about to find something in there where I'm like, I don't know if the parent actually wants their child to be like, yes, this is I want my child to talk about how, I don't know, someone decapitated something or has some really, really creepy piece of lore that they might not have wanted their child to have nightmares about.
So I did, in 2020, during the proofreading phase, I brought in a friend of mine who I'd worked with as a curriculum developer at a previous job, and asked her to do a review of the deck and give me an assessment from it, a bit as an educational tool, as well as like the kind of general age category. So in that process, and most of the like PG-13 and up prompts have been moved from the main deck into the expansions. As I was developing the expansions anyway, there have been a couple that had been in the main deck that I was not sure about anyway that I decided to move at that point. And when she did her assessment, I think, so from a like complexity of use education perspective, she was like, grade 6, this is perfect for grade 6. But none of the content in the main deck was considered to be objectionable. There was no like bad material that you wouldn't be able to run with your child in the main deck. And then we included some mentions, I think, for the horror expansions specifically, or expansions and boosters, that there would be some scary themes and some slightly more mature material. But that said, there were still things that, like, when I write the documents for our guest writers who come in projects, there are some things that I explicitly don't do. Like, I don't do any kind of sexual violence in any of the decks. There's no prompts related to that. Writers can integrate certain tools or storylines if they want and choose to, but that's not one that I would encourage someone to pick up, especially without thinking about the care required to tell those stories responsibly and to make sure that that story is being told in like a consensual framework, and say like a tabletop RPG, where you wouldn't want to initiate a storyline like that without having extensively checked in with people and put a ton of safety tools in place. So there are some storylines that like are never specifically prompted by the cards, and there's some material that we don't go there. We don't go there. There are prompts where, like, if you wanted to interpret things more broadly, maybe you could run in whatever direction you want. But we kept everything very like PG for the main deck. But conflict is one of those things where it's so broad and universal that you can interpret the same conflict in a variety of ways, including ways that feel very adult or complex or mature. So there's lots of ways to use the cards. But yeah, we did have a curriculum developer do an extensive review of the deck, and we've done that for every deck since.
I know for Lore Master's deck as well, like we will have a resource site available that kind of digs into the sensitivities that because I think sometimes as you build, like Lore Master's deck is so large, it's so complex, it's 300 double-sided cards, there's just so much more you delve into, and when you get into lore and these stories, you obviously have more particular touch points of sensitivity. And I know that that's why we ended up developing like a larger resource page, just to kind of point people to if they want to make sure they're very considered in their storytelling.
Yes, exactly. And that was a deck where, because there's such a variety of material, we had the opportunity to develop basically the support tools to make more, I'd say like more fraught storytelling that deals with difficult issues that we don't necessarily want to remove from storytelling, but that we want to create a responsible framework for. That's where we sort of decided to really think about how we could do that. There's still some things that we didn't go to even there, but we were able to broaden the scope a lot in terms of like what specific issues you want to talk about, like colonialism and other kinds of violence, that how you talk about it and the way you describe the power dynamics.
And I think it's important, right? I think part of real good storytelling, or just being responsible as human beings, is to not shy or ignore the stories, but to actually shed light on them, because omission and erasure of the darker points in history is often very dangerous as well, both in real life and in stories. So I think for us to be able to approach shining a light on things as responsible storytellers is actually a really good thing. I was actually commenting today. My father sent me an article on Facebook, out of all things, about he's like, did you know that like over 55 Christians and Catholics were brutally tortured and killed by like the shogunate back in the 16th century because they were trying to bury Christianity? And I was like, actually, I do. Have you watched Blue Eye Samurai on Netflix? But I mean, it's based on a real piece of history. Obviously, it's historical fiction, but Blue Eye Samurai certainly is not, is a quite violent show that definitely depicts like a lot of different forms of violence and torture, and a lot of really challenging things in its storytelling, but not just like the telling the story, but visually for you as well. And it's incredibly well researched and a really good piece of ways for people to learn something, maybe a little piece of history in a way that's a little bit more accessible. Maybe not accessible. Maybe accessible is not the right word, but just immersive, right? And in a different format, like through edutainment, essentially.
Yeah.
Anyways, I know people have been talking about corner tucking and initiate or what did we end up winning?
Cultist
Cultist
won.
won first.
Oh,
Initiate
okay.
got the most votes.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
we could
And then people
basically
talk
do a
about
little
horse.
what's called a
I think
corner check, where we
I
turn
think
it
we okay.
diagonal.
I get it. We worked. Okay.
Yeah.
One second.
So it could be
We
an
will-
initiate cultist there. And then we will give them a motivation. So this is going to be drawn from the Fairy Tales deck. Do they want to seal the magic realm in or with something? Or do they want to reach the magic realm through something? So you can go ahead and vote for seal or reach in 3, 2, 1, go.
It's funny because I just had this moment where I was like, when I read it on its own, for me, magic rarely inherently seems dark to me. It's only when it's qualified through something like dark magic where my brain's like, oh, it's dark. But I realized literally in this moment, as you showed me this card, without any qualifiers, for me, magic inherently is gentle. And I'm like, why is this horror? And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait.
It's not.
Yeah.
I think there's some of the Fairy Tale deck
Yeah,
as
this
well.
is Fairy Tales.
Oh, did you go back and forth? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
maybe
we're
you were
gonna go-
doing like a 1-in-1.
No, so what I'm gonna do 2 fairies in a row and then do 1 more Eldritch.
But there is definitely an element of horror. Like if the cultist wants to reach the magic realm, like there is a lot of love of like Lovecraftian stories that are basically trying to reach the bad. Like somebody tries to reach the bad place. Like that's basically Call of Cthulhu.
It also really is
a bad thing tries to reach the good place. Is the other thing that this could be.
Yeah.
It's also a really good indicator of just how, when you get boosters or our expansions, how they can actually play with each other, even when you think the genres don't work. I know one thing you always said you like doing is doing some genre mashing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. This is why we structured this this last sort of set of prompts where we did. I love doing genre cocktails, I call them, where you mix together 2 different genres and find the things that are really exciting about both of them and what kind of chemistry you can create with that. And there's so many great examples of it. I think it's one of the ways that the Magic the Gathering has been so successful and like constantly revitalizing the storyline is like jumping to a new plane of existence where it's like fantasy plus. They did a mystery one recently. They did fantasy plus Western for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And actually, I believe Outlaws of Thunder Junction is one of the Magic blocks that Grace Fong worked on, who gave us the blurb for the cover of Deck of Worlds.
It's a very effective world building setup. Now they're just going to like D&D worlds and like Assassin's Creed land, but
oh yeah, the mythic lore drops are I think kind of a little bit out of canon in some ways, as opposed to some of the more core worlds. But yeah, it's a very nice setup to have if you want to be able to like play with different IPs. But our initiate cultist wants to reach the magic realm through. So there's another card from Fairy Tales. A bell, a birthmark, a cottage, or an enchantment. So you go ahead and vote for bell, birthmark, cottage, or enchantment in 3, 2, 1, go.
I like the graphic on that one.
Yeah. I really liked. I remember really liking this image. Choosing the images and curating the images for the expansions and boosters is some of my favorite work that I get to do in deck development. I just love.
But birthmark went right off.
Okay.
All right.
This is very omen coded.
Yeah, this is very omen coded for sure. Okay, so let's go back to Eldritch Horror for the conflict, and then maybe for the aspect, maybe we'll just do one more booster just for fun.
And all boosters have a little bit of each deck inside of them, right?
That is correct, yeah. All boosters have all 5 card types. The exact makeup of those card types is different for the old block and the new block, but they all have all 5 card types. So here's our conflict card. But the memory will haunt them forever. But they will live the rest of their life with false memories.
Oh.
Ooh, I like both of these. So you can go ahead and vote for false memories or haunt. And you can vote in 3, 2, 1, go. Are you vibing with anything here? Is there anything that you think plugs into the story nicely?
I mean, I think at least we both seem to viscerally respond to the false memories part. That clearly was interesting to me. Now, the thing that I then question myself afterwards with false memories is, would they know, or would only other people know? Because I feel like that would really change the situation on how they interact. Because if you live with false memories and you don't know, then it doesn't, like, it's like it almost doesn't matter other than how it impacts people around you.
Well,
right?
it's very, yeah, it's like that whole like this way lies madness, where it's like you can be completely convinced that you're right, and then it's just wrong. It's
Yeah.
very out of step with reality, which is like really terrifying for me.
Yeah, yeah. I love doing stories that deal with memory. I know I didn't realize until I got my ADHD diagnosis that, you know, memory is part of how you construct a stable model for reality. And if you lose memory, you kind of lose that stability. And I realized, like, oh, I have a condition that affects my memory. It's probably where a lot of that fundamental anxiety around, like, what happens if you lose memory and you lose identity and you lose experience and you lose that narrative of who you are. It just felt very deeply terrifying to me. So I love doing stories that play with memory horror. False memory is one. And yeah, actually, the thing that you talked about, like, do they know whether or not they have false memories, is a really interesting. There's a blog that I wrote for Halloween 2020 for thestoryengine.com. You can search it by like searching how to write horror in the search bar, about the difference between suspense and surprise in writing horror. And I think what you're talking about actually really pulls on suspense versus surprise. I think if they know that they have false memories, but they can't tell which ones are which, then that is an example of suspense. The thing has already been revealed, and it is the tension of seeing how that is going to play out that creates the horror there. Whereas surprise horror would be at the end of the story, you reveal that the entire time this narrative that this character has been telling us about what happened is riddled with false memories, and it's the twist, the surprise that this entire account could be wrong, or that things could have gone differently. And both of them have a different tool in the toolbox. Both of them are different tools in the toolbox and have different payoffs. But I think it's a really good example of suspense and tension versus surprise or twist, and as two different modes of talking about storytelling in horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually remember. Now, it's like, as we're talking about this, it has a little less to do with memory per se, but I think there was a short story that I had to read many years ago in a science fiction class that was called Passengers. And I think the concept of that story was that humans have been enslaved by aliens, but the aliens basically like ride you like a passenger. So they go off and, you know, do their own thing, and then you don't know how long they're going to ride you for, but then they eventually drop you, and then you kind of have to pick up the pieces of your life and go back and return. And I think the story was sort of about two people who hadn't been written for a while, or they managed to they managed to carve out a life for themselves. Like, they managed to find a relationship and create a relationship to each other that was meaningful. And the story sort of ends with eventually one of them gets ridden, and kind of needing to reconcile that you're about to like lose this person in your life for an indefinite period of time, if not forever. And I actually can't remember if, like, when you were dropped as a passenger, whether you actually forgot your life up until that point. Like, right. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've read the story, but I all of a sudden, like, reading this prompt, it kind of triggered a memory of, I was like, why do I feel a little bit uncanny valley around this? And it's probably because when I read that short story, I felt very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. It reminds me of the novel Pandemonium by Daryl Gregory, which has some similar concepts but handled really differently. That I also really liked, or really connected with that novel.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about how you like writing stories around memory. I've never really been particularly, I guess, interested per se in writing fiction around memory. But I think sometimes now I don't, if I had to think about it, just hearing what you said, that you like writing stories about memory, I think in some ways, like, I don't know if I do, as much as I like to comment on it a lot, but I don't know how much I would like to write about it other than having it be a lived experience, because I had a really bad concussion in 2013, and it's had some really long-term impacts on my mind, on how my mind functions, including memory. And it's something I have a lot of grief about. But it's so, like, if I was going to ever write about memory, it's mostly because I would want to be used as a tool to educate people about an area of neuroscience that we're not very familiar with yet.
I wanted to make people as scared as I feel when I think about it.
It's like if you wanted to, like, kind of like split the difference, have something that's like a concept that's vaguely terrifying if you think about it, but at the same time very heartwarming. You could go with Coco,
Oh yeah.
which is all about memory and how we get remembered and how we
Yeah.
get carried even into the future. Well, like how long we live, basically.
Yeah.
It's
I remember my dad once said that to me when I was looking at a like a display of human remains at a museum, because they kind of showed like this was how this person was buried and you're looking at their remains. And I remember kind of thinking like I remember making a comment at that time about how I felt kind of bad that these remains were kind of being put on display for our like pleasure. And there's obviously these days a lot of commentary of what it means to be taking historical artifacts away from like countries of origin. This one was of like a village, or not that it makes it better for worse, but my dad said, well, in some ways, this poor peasant is remembered forever, and in some cultures, it's actually good that you're like the way you live in the afterlife is by being remembered. And I was like, I remember feeling challenged because my dad likes to challenge me on a lot of things, but at the same time, I was like, but it also is weirdly logical if you say it that way.
It's like, who is the lord of this village? We got no idea, but this peasant.
Yeah. Sometimes you just you become you like you're the lucky dinosaur who gets fossilized.
He's the lucky dinosaur.
Yeah, but I think let's bring this one home. Let's do an aspect card. I think I'm gonna draw from another booster just for fun, and I'm feeling a little bit like, what if we threw a cowboy in here? You know, I just think it might be fun. So I might push for a draw from Outlaws and Gunslingers just because I'm in the mood to bring it home with a cowboy. Bring it home with a cowboy.
It has to be the most cowboy of cowboy aspect cards then.
Okay, let me see what I can find for us here.
It has to be so cowboy. Like it can't. There has to be no doubts about how cowboy this aspect card is.
Oh yeah, they're all okay. So I'm just looking at them ahead of time. They're all good. Yeah, none of these won't work.
It's all because we talked about Into the Badlands.
Yeah. I think that's probably what got me on it. Okay. Here we go. Fast talking, dapper, frontier, or dirty. So that can go ahead and apply to our initiate cultist or our birthmark. But for now, we'll just vote on which prompt we're using. So you can vote on fast talking, dapper, frontier, or dirty, and vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
Do you know
those are also good. Like the thing is, some of them don't necessarily seem that cowboy until you say them out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the fact that it came out of the Western booster.
Yeah.
It also is just one of those things too where I sometimes do maybe like recognize my ESL-ness, or the fact that I am the child of immigrants, because there's these things that probably do tie into a lot of those areas of genre and culture. But for me, it was always just a giant mashup, right? Like dapper for me is like pseudo of the Victorian era, which is sort of in the same time as the cowboy era.
Yeah.
Right? Victorian era, cowboy era are inherently the same thing, but usually when we talk about Victorians, we think about tea gardens. And then you think about Westerns, you think about sand. It's just where the Victorians were hanging out at the time.
It's like for anybody who's seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, when I see dapper, all I can think about is George Clooney saying, "I don't want fop, I'm a dapper Dan man."
Yeah.
When he's buying hair gel, basically.
Yeah.
He's only buying Dapper Dan hair gel. Yeah, so it's definitely like the inflection you say the word with definitely changes. It's like you say it with a British accent or a Southern twang.
And what I found was a lot of the words for the Western booster, a lot of the really cowboy sounding words were all the rough ones, and I didn't just want rough adjectives, right? Like even if you're doing a Western story, you'll need to have some things that aren't just like rough, fast talking, rootin' tootin', yellow bellied. So to get like just positively framed adjectives, which is one of the ways that I balance aspects, I needed to go to some words that are still Western adjacent, but would also appear in other genres, but that definitely have their own meaning when they drop into the world of Western.
So how many apostrophes end up in the Western booster to make the words more Western sounding?
So we got hard drinking.
I
Highfalutin is actually an adjective that doesn't require the apostrophe. I remember putting it in there, and then actually a proofreader took it out for me.
But we have good for nothing.
But good for nothing. Yep. And then no apostrophes on this one. Quick-handed, unseated, yellow-bellied, and wanted. Unseated is our the Western booster actually comes with an acknowledgement that the Western genre entirely is built on kind of this like manifest destiny that this frontier is not already full of people who have been living here for thousands of years in the forms of indigenous people. So there's a section in the Western booster where we actually talk about just like kind of acknowledging the whole colonial problem of the Western genre as kind of like a fantasy. And then unseated is one of our words that just kind of just draws a little bit of specific attention to like one of the things about the frontier. But we have voted for fast talking in this case. And I mean, it seems obvious that it should go to a person, but a fast talking birthmark would be really interesting too. So I am going to put this to the final vote of our little session here before we wrap things up. Fast talking cultist or fast talking birthmark? You can go ahead and vote in 3, 2, 1, go.
I mean, the birthmark could have been a parasite. Or could be a parasite. I mean, like, literally, there's always, like, I've definitely seen horror-esque things where there's been, like, the talking growth on the human body.
This could also be, like, the passenger idea that you're talking about. Like, this could be the way that the, some kind of, like, evil entity resides in the skin is in the form of this birthmark. Like, that's where, and so it is fast talking. It is true.
Our skins are full of cells. They are all technically alive.
All right, so we've got...
Cultist, I think, got it, though.
I think Cultist did.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean,
I think I literally saw a really random comic recently that was like someone like walks into, I don't remember if it was like a bar, and basically like asks for something valuable. Maybe it wasn't a bar, but they were like, I would like to withdraw $10,000 or something, please. And then the guy like looks up at him and is like, you're not a human. Then he pulls out like a giant magnifying glass. He's like, you're just like a cluster of cells disguised as a human under a jacket. And then like way in the microscopic is like a whole pile of cells. And it's like, anyways, that's just me being a giant weird science nerd.
No, that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun. But we do have our giant pile of cells in this case is our cultist who walks into a bar, our fast talking cultist who wants to reach the magic realm through a birthmark. Theirs, someone else's, I don't know. I think that's a good place for the story to start. But they will live the rest of their life with false memories. And I definitely feel like this has got to take place in the West. If we're doing a cultist thing, I think an Eldritch horror cowboy story can be a very interesting.
I do really love the idea of a fast talking cultist, because it's like normally you think of like cultists and it's like robes and they're chanting, but it's like a fast talking cultist is almost like a door to door salesman. It's like, it's like have you heard about our Lord and Savior Cthulhu?
Now listen, for a limited time, I can get you in on a real good blood pact, but you got to pledge today, and don't worry, you can pay in installments.
Exactly, like basically like a snake oil salesman, but that snake oil, like the snake for that oil is like 1,000 stories tall and like secretes like madness venom.
Yeah. A cultist, to answer Rose's question, is someone in a cult, someone who's joined like a fringe religious group, usually that has very inside thinking of like the way that we believe the world works is the only correct way. We can't listen to anyone outside, and usually they have a very unique set of beliefs around that.
Or extreme.
That's a cultist. Yeah, or extreme. Yeah. But that's our prompt there. A fast-talking cultist wants to reach a magic realm through a birthmark, but they will live the rest of their life with false memories. I think it is time to wrap up with the draw.
Yes, Eric is vehemently shredding the last entries.
We had a last-minute entry.
So, but I think I like that we managed to combine. We don't feature our boosters enough, I think, whenever we do these live streams, because I think there's always like so much to explore every single time. So to bring in some of our other genres is always super fun. And I also like how we like immediately broke a rule by doing not even a corner tuck, like a corner start.
Yeah.
Which I kind of dig.
That's one of my new, like, I guess, rules to break is I love any way you can make two prompts happen in any kind of physical configuration. I go for it.
I definitely have seen more and more interesting shapes happen in our live streams or even when we do demos. Like I've definitely walked like during Gen Con. Sometimes, we usually have 3 or 4 of us demoing on different tables, and sometimes we walk around cleaning them up. And I walk down and I'll be like, why is there like a diamond over here? That diamond's over here, and then there's like a weird shape that's going here.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love seeing people get to kind of do a little bit more freeform with the decks. It's very cool.
It's also cool when we let people build their own prompt, because then you see how. I remember one time kind of automatically, not correct, but automatically, like when someone was laying their cards down, tucking it and everything. And then I realized that's not the point, right? Like that if this is how they read it, that's the way they should do it, because you need to make the deck work with you and work with all the ways your patterns work, because that's how you're gonna leverage it the best as a tool.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why the rule book is a guidebook, and the first guidance is to do what work makes sense for you.
Yes, actually, I'm gonna let Eric draw, because he's been so on top of all the stuff that's been happening throughout the stream. So I want him to be the one to select the winner. And if the person has left if the person isn't from the stream, we'll make sure we contact you, but we'll announce it for everyone so you can hold us all accountable.
The winner is J Debro Art on Twitter, who I think told us.
He's in the chat right now.
Yeah, he's the one who reminded me that Into the Badlands exists.
Yeah.
So thank you congrats for winning, and thank you for also for also getting us the actual reference that we needed.
Yeah. Just trying to find that post or the comment about Into the Badlands. But that's fine.
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to also see what was. I would also love to know what J. Debro said about the deck.
So he tried an online. He's on Twitter. He's still getting the full version, but he's using it for his original graphic novels. Or for world building for his graphic novels.
Oh, I love that. I love that there is a visual element to it. All right. Awesome. Well, we will contact you at some point. Well, when I say we, as in Eric will contact you so we can get all your details so we can send out.
I will message you on. I'll message you on the platform that you reached out on. Is I think so.
Okay. Yes.
Make sure your DMs are open, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, we'll be in touch so we can get all your deets and get you a shiny little anthology and a playmat.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you to everybody who participated and who shared their stories about the Story Engine deck and the way that they use it. Thanks everyone for voting and helping us craft these stories here today. This was so much fun. And thanks everyone for letting me sort of share the story about how the deck came to be.
And thank you for sharing your stories as well. Like everybody who entered, because there are some. It's lovely.
Yeah, there's some really lovely stories about how everyone used their deck. It really means so much that you guys continue to support us and celebrate this anniversary with us as well, and show that, Story Engine deck will have people who come to their birthday party as well. If you stay tuned for any of our future upcoming live streams or anything that we're up to. You can subscribe to our newsletter at storyenginedeck.com. You can follow us on socials. We always love getting together with you guys. So our sale will run till Friday. So if you're looking at completing your Story Engine deck collection, or someone who's interested, feel free to share the sale with them.
It runs through the day on Friday the 13th. So if you need more horror,
yeah,
yes,
auspicious day.
Oh, I think there's a hint that we're possibly on a podcast on September 29th.
Yes. So I am going to be doing the infamous podcast with Taylor and Josie. I didn't mean to tell you guys about this. It won't necessarily be, it's not. There is going to be a Story Engine draw as part of it. It's going to be the first time that I've seen the Story Engine used for nonfiction. Yeah, so I'm very excited for this. I'm still actually putting together my notes for what I'm going to be talking about. So the Bittersweet Infamy, sorry, is the name of the podcast, and they kind of do deep dives on just sort of infamous people and things and places. And I've actually taken something that Maroki, you and I worked on a script on together about the Killers of Eden. These very cool killer whales. And I'm going to be doing sort of a longer look and deep dive on that and why I think that they are an infamous animal. And yeah, that'll be, I believe we're going to be recording next week. It should come out September 29th. And you can look forward to that. Bittersweet Infamy.
Cool. That's amazing. That's amazing. I say that unironically. That is it's all good. It's all good. I just didn't know, which is okay. There's a lot of things that happen in the world of Story Engine. So yes, I'm sure you will probably say something on our socials about that or our newsletter. We have our sale. Thank you all so much for joining us, and till next time, I guess. And if we don't end up with a next live stream before Halloween, Eric and I will evolve into two different humans by then. Not horror based.
I was gonna say that's a very strange way of putting it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm putting the horror spin on it for Halloween. We'll be puppets.
Terrifying puppets. Please don't find any way to animate your puppets if we do this, because that would thanks everyone. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.